Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Monday Overreaction Show here on the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That good-looking hunk across the screen from me, that is Anwar Richardson. We're both of orangebloods.com. This video brought to you by Rogue Apothecary, therogueshop.com. One of our favorite sponsors for a million different reasons, but did you see the thread over the weekend on Orange Bloods, Anwar?
I missed it. I've been in daddy duty. So what did I miss?
Oh, just there was a Rogue thread.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just amazing to see the various ways that people use the products and how and why they use them. Considering our demographic skew to older men, it was interesting to see the old crew so into the product. Look, we love the rogueshop.com, whether you're getting cartridges or gummies, or you're getting stuff to help your joints and your bones and the pains that you feel on a day in and day out basis, they can cover you. Check out the website, therogueshop.com. We're talking Texas football, Texas basketball, Texas women's basketball, maybe even a little bit of baseball. Like, there's a lot to get into on a Monday Overreaction show today, Anwar. Let's just start with the best news first if you're a Texas Longhorn fan, and that is the Texas women's basketball team did the damn thing. They slayed the Baylor Dragon, and they're now Big 12 tournament champions, which we won't go to Cocoa for Cocoa Puffs, right? Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, simply because the men's team did this a year ago, and then they lost in the first round, and the coach got fired. So on one hand, you don't want to get too crazy about the Big 12 tournament, but on the other hand, this was a Baylor team that has owned Texas for so long. To beat them in that situation, third time they played this season, to do it with a trophy on the line, and to see Rory Harmon, our girl, our Orange Bloods athlete, just turn into I think a national superstar over the course of a couple of days, with 50 points and 0 turnovers and 80 minutes of action in back-to-back games against Iowa State and Baylor. It's a weird little thing going on. I feel like maybe this is my first big overreaction of the day. I think Texas fans may be more pumped up and fired up about the women's tournament coming into March Madness than they are about the men's tournament. And it's been a long time since I think that that's been the case.
Well, first of all, Catch, you love to see it, right? I mean, just, I'll get at some point, I'll tell you all my opinions about, Vic Schaefer. And look, I don't think, the average Texas fan, average Longhorn observer, is not the, diehard women's basketball fan. But sometimes you got to recognize greatness, right? You got to recognize something when you're seeing it right in front of your eyes, and to ignore it would be some sort of malpractice. And what the women have been able to do in this stretch of March, but before the tournament, Catch, heading into the tournament, some big wins, key wins, get some good opponents, and get the Kansas win that comes to mind, and as they go down the state, the Iowa State, obviously in the tournament, there's so many good and amazing wins. And the thing that stands out to me, Catch, as I've watched this team, and again, I don't profess to be some sort of aficionado that I can tell you the history of Texas women's basketball. But when I do watch it, and I have watched a lot over the past couple of months, I see a gritty team, Catch, a team that is just not afraid to get their elbows and hands dirty, a team that, dives for loose balls. You can tell this is a well-coached team with some really talented athletes, Catch. I mean, we'll get into Rory Harmon. I love Lauren Ebo. My girl down in the paint. I mean, I just love her footwork, her agility, the toughness, the grittiness, that she has. I love Joanne Allen Taylor and what she's able to do. This whole team is just really, just a well-oiled machine, a lot of chemistry that you can see. And again, I go back to well-coached. And you should be excited, Catch, to your point, they did slay the Baylor Dragon. They did finally get over that hump. They were able to cut down the nets and be able to have this momentum. At some point, you just got to say, damn, they did the damn thing. And this is a damn good team.
Yeah, they are a clear reflection of their coach. And we'll talk about Vic Schaefer here in a second. And I don't think it's an overreaction on an Overreaction Monday show at all to say he's doing the thing that he was hired to do.
Yeah.
When they brought him in, the target was lift and elevate the program, beat Baylor, and then do some damage in the NCAA tournament. That is, kind of been the MO of what they're looking for. They lose their force. He loses his first 4 games against Baylor, including back-to-back games on February 4th and February 6th of this year. They haven't lost since. So they had a little 3-game losing streak where they lost at Oklahoma, at home against Baylor, and then, or I guess on the road against Baylor, and then they played Baylor at home. They haven't lost since. And you could see coming out of those games against Baylor that Vic Schaefer was bothered by it, that he was bothered by not being able to slay the dragon. Like, he's a guy that embraces these incredibly high expectations. You get the sense that he expects himself to do things like beat Baylor and to cut down the nets. And I think that there's been a change in the program. Sometimes you win by losing. Sometimes the right combination of disappointment is the thing that motivates teams to eventually reaching out for greatness. That Texas hasn't lost since they felt that sting, and that they came back. I got to be honest, there's a part of me when they beat Iowa State in overtime the other day, I guess on Saturday, there was a part of me that was thinking, oh man, not Baylor. Like, you're hot. You've won like 10 in a row. You're going into the NCAA tournament. Do you really need to take one on the chin from your arch rival right, like last game before the tournament? I really didn't anticipate Texas giving Baylor a bit of a shiner on both eyes. But they did. They landed haymakers. But I thought that, when we talk about Steve Sarkisian, we don't often talk, we don't talk about, you and I, about Chris Beard in the Texas basketball program a ton, but we do. Vic Schaefer is the poster boy for like what these coaches need to do. Like, Vic Schaefer's in his 2nd season. And in year 2, he's got his recruits. You don't hear Vic talking about what he doesn't have. He's got a young team. He's got a freshman point guard who's doing all of this for the first time. There are no excuses. And I think that when we think about Steve Sarkisian, we think about Chris Beard on the men's side of things, they need to look to Vic Schaefer for inspiration. There's a guy whose imprint on the program can be seen with the naked eye. His team is starting to accomplish the very things he was hired to do. And again, you can watch this team and you can see his influence all over it. There are times when I watch the Texas men's basketball team and Chris Beard, and they play really tough defense. But there are times when it feels like there's disconnect between him and his players, no more so than after the game against TCU on Thursday, when he essentially said, I can't be bothered with these players. And it was like, well, you're the coach.
And you recruited the majority of them, by the way. It's like 4 carryovers, and the rest of those guys are yours. So, I mean, hello.
Well, and you and I feel the same way about the football program too. Like, you and I have now covered enough new coaches over the course of the last few years that we've seen and heard all of the excuses. And look, sometimes an excuse is nothing other than the reason why something happens. But you have to be better than that. You have to be bigger than that. And I think we watched this weekend the women's program grow up in a way that really is the story. The men's Texas basketball team next year, it feels like, is the year when, okay, if things don't start to happen by year 2, what's happening? But it feels like that's the case for Sarkisian as well. Like, you get a 1-year get out of jail card to a certain extent. They go 5-7. I think there's not a Texas fan alive right now that wouldn't like to see a little Vic Schaefer in Steve Sarkisian's job performance next year. And, I think that that's the kind of tide that lifts all boats. And I think when the other programs in the athletic department are doing really well, it motivates, it inspires, and it lets the other guys know, like, if I don't do it, I'm the loser. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's winning but us. And I think that that's the kind of thing that'll help. Now, maybe that's a bit of a Monday overreaction, right? This idea that the women's basketball team, it's okay, just let that one go. That the women's basketball team will serve as inspiration for the football program. Yeah. But I've covered Texas athletics when everybody's good at the same time. And there is a little bit of pride. There is a little bit of football players go out and support the softball players and the baseball players and the women's basketball players, and the other athletes in those sports do the exact same thing. It helps when everybody is good, when you can do that. And when everybody's not good, it stands out a little bit. But that might be good because there's just not enough winners in Texas athletics. That some of these big programs, and the women's basketball program is the biggest program on the women's side of sports by a lot. To have them starting to elevate themselves up, I think all eyes turn to the men's basketball and to the football teams and say, okay, you're next. Because if Vic can do it, you should be able to do it.
Like right now, Catch, if we have to say who are the best coaches on campus, you put Eddie Reese as number one and probably put Vic Schaefer as number two. Now, there could be, a debate that could be held, for Edric Florial, the men's,
I was about to say.
now, look. Edric is probably holding all these trophies right now. He's like, excuse me, sir? Like, excuse me. Let me hit you with this men's indoor track and field championship trophy that I just did, right? And so there's an argument to be had. And really, and to be fair, Edric probably could be number two, right? I mean, like, what the men did over the weekend from a track and field, that's the first. Catch, if I'm correct, that's the first time that has happened. So what you're seeing, Catch, to the bigger point versus we know Reese is number one, right? And then everyone can fight for number two. We can have a Schaefer or a Florial, conversation for number two. And Florial probably deserves number two at this moment. But all that matters at the end of the day, Catch, is what we're talking about is these teams are winning. These programs are winning. Like at the end of the day, these guys have come in. Florial had success at Kentucky and Stanford. He comes here in Texas a few years ago, gets it going, and now here they are, men's indoor champion. You had Schaefer come in, Catch, and first year, Catch, he takes him to the Elite Eight. First year, that's what he does. Second year, they win a Big 12 title, and we'll see what happens in this season. And what we've seen, and this is the other part, though, we've seen too many excuses from the other quote unquote major sports. I mean, we saw it, with Shaka, and all that happened there. We saw it with Charlie and all that happened there. Really, at the last three football coaches, it's been a lot of, I've got to bring in my own players. I got to develop the program. I've got to do all these things. And, ultimately, you sit there waiting and saying, okay, it's like, waiting for this thing to happen. And then you see a guy like Schaefer come in and go, I'm just going to do the damn thing. I've been to a Final Four at Mississippi State twice. I know how to do this, and I will come in and I shall do this. And so it makes you at some point, Catch, look at the other programs and say, okay, and I get it. You can say, well, basketball is different. Well, is it? Because we've been waiting for it on the men's side for a lot of years. I mean, if basketball is different, You've
never seen the men's basketball team achieve any success, really, since you've been here. Like, it's a myth.
The NIT championship, the NIT title.
The banner that Texas fans bristle at the thought that flies in the Irwin Center, soon to be the Moody Center. I just think that there's a moral. You think about Florial and and Schaefer to a certain, definitely they fall into the category of had a lot of success before they arrived at Texas. And in years 2 and 3, you start to see their imprint in the program, like really and truly. Like, okay, this is who they're going to be. And I think that in the instances of both of those coaches, they've now passed a certain threshold. They've now accomplished a certain amount. And look, I think Vic Schaefer would probably say, you know what, let's make a deep run in March. And Texas has a 2 seed now, is straddled with expectations that the men won't have. But you get to a point next year with Beard, this year with Sarkisian, when you start to get into years 2 and 3, the expectation can only be you have to start taking significant steps forward. And, I think that that's the backdrop of what we're watching right now is one program, specifically the women's basketball program, start their ascension. Because I think you'd look at the track team and say the women's program under Floreal and even beyond that has always been really good. Mm-hmm. I can remember being a student at Texas in the mid 90s and I was the SID for cross country very shortly before that no longer happened. But I was there when Bubba Thornton took over, and he was hired to elevate the men's program, to get the men's program competing at an elite level. And it really has never felt like that's who Texas is. Consider me absolutely shocked to see Texas win an indoor national championship on the men's side of things. If that had been the women, I'd have shrugged my shoulders because they finished second. Yeah. And that felt very much ho-hum for them. Like, oh, second, they call that Saturday in March for the Texas women. But that the men were able to do that, I don't want to belabor the point too much, but we talk a lot of football every day. These are the steps that Sarkisian and company have to start making this season, or else, or you get into a year 3 and people start to talk about the things that you haven't done a lot. And I think that, that was the thing is, if Schaefer and the Texas women lose that game yesterday, that's 14 consecutive losses to Baylor. That's 5 of them under Schaefer. And no matter how they do in the tournament, short of going to the Final Four, it feels like that cloud would have hovered. And we know of other sports where that cloud hovers. When we specifically talk about Texas football, it's a sport that has clouds. It's a sport that has an Oklahoma cloud. It's a sport that up until recently had a TCU cloud that wouldn't go away.
Oklahoma State cloud.
There are clouds. And, I think moving forward, it's just sets the stage for what really and truly has to happen. We spend so much time talking about Arch Manning, and we will do that here in a second. There's a reality with the Texas football program that it has to start winning some games. That Sarkisian wasn't brought in to be 5-7. He wasn't even brought in to be 8-4 or 9-3, which feels like celebratory seasons in year 2 based on what happened a year ago. I think that the bar, it's almost as if I think the football program needs these other programs to succeed so that everybody can remember what they're in this thing for. Not rewriting the expectations and the goals midway through seasons when things have gone off the rails. And it's like, one moment you're talking about getting into a Big 12 championship game. The next you're talking about how you need all your new players. So, I don't know. I think it was exciting for the women to accomplish what they did. That we're even leading off. Like, you and I couldn't have guessed going into the weekend that when we would do the Monday Overreaction show, that the women's basketball team would be front and center coming out of it. What do we think about the Texas men's basketball team? I thought they got an awful draw. Virginia Tech just won the ACC tournament. They've won 13 out of 15. And, oh, by the way, if you can win that, you've got probably Purdue and maybe the best player in the country waiting for you in round 2. Okay, Chris Beard, this is why they brought you. The reason why Shaka Smart got replaced at Texas was they wanted somebody that would come in and succeed in March. That's what Chris Beard has been as a basketball coach, certainly since he arrived at Texas Tech. He's a guy that wins in the tournament. He's never lost to a lower ranked seeded team, which says on paper, Texas should win their opener against Virginia Tech, which, to be fair, Texas is a 2.5-point favorite, but they're not shooting from the layup line. The expectations when this season started were Sweet 16 at a minimum. Get that monkey off the back because the program hasn't done it for a decade. And I don't know how to handicap what I think the chances of them pulling that off this weekend are, but it feels like 25%-ish, maybe. And that might be a smidge too high when you consider they're probably 50-50 in their opening round game, and they're probably an underdog 40-60-ish if they get in a matchup against Purdue. So, you know, if Texas advances to the Sweet 16, we should acknowledge a week out. That would be one hell of a coaching job by Chris Beard to get that team playing at a level where they can win back-to-back games. But this is where it's supposed to count. And I'm not sure that it's going to happen for Chris Beard in year one.
You know, it's funny you ask him like my reaction to the draw and you know what that looks like. You remember the infamous, you know, Alfred quote from the Batman about how some people just like to watch the world burn. I got to be honest, I wasn't as focused on the bracket as I was from the A&M meltdown that I was seeing on Twitter. I'll be honest, just watching that. I focused more on that and just looking at the meltdown more so than the bracket catch. I gotta be honest with you.
I think one of the most there are two things that are probably among the most pathetic things in the world, and they both met. It was a head-on collision last night. The first thing is, anytime after the NCAA tournament is announced and the bubble teams get mad, it's pretty pathetic. Like a team that might have been in the play-in game gets in its feelings about how it was overlooked, and it was like, well, no, you're an average basketball team. Like how much am I supposed to care about that? As it turns out, none. I care none about teams that get left out of the tournament. If you ever find yourself following a team that's a bubble team and they don't make it, like, win some more games. Don't finish 8th in your conference. Like, don't leave it up to that. And so you have fans of teams of bubble teams that missed the tournament crying. And then you have Texas A&M fans that feel like an injustice has been done upon them. If you have those two things run head on, you got a bunch of bitches and crybabies just losing their minds. And yes, it was hard not to giggle and chuckle a few times yesterday at just how upset they were.
It was hilarious. Like I was just watching it. I'm watching, you know, the fan reaction, the reaction from reporters who covered the team. I mean, you go down the list and I was like, wow, this is, let me hit refresh. This was, let me, one more time, pour myself another drink. This is entertaining. So, you know, so anyway, I had to say that I, as a person who does sometimes like to watch the world burn, that was actually somewhat comical to me.
Let the boycotts begin.
It was so good. But you're right. I mean, as far as there's a couple of things as far as that bracket, you know, getting that draw obviously is going to be tough. You know, losing to TCU in the first game, you know, was a little bit you know, disappointing. I mean, that's a game they should not have lost. I mean, they were. At some point, I mean, they were just smoking TCU, and I'm just thinking to myself, all right, you know, who they face next, and then it's just starting to happen one by another, and you're just telling yourself this is a huge collapse. And you know, the way that, you know, when you ask like what to think about this team, I mean, Chris Beard kind of told us what he thought about this team after the game, and it's an interesting, you know, thing, Catch, because when you kind of put your guys on blast heading into the tournament, and by the way, just in general, and by the way, I'm just never a fan of college coaches blasting their guys. Like it's such an interesting thing that when it's convenient, these are your kids, right? When it's convenient, yay, man, these are kids, man. You got to be careful what you say about these kids. Then when it's not convenient, then it's like, yeah, man, these aren't my guys. Like, these guys got to do better. And I'm just always like, are they kids or are they not your kids? Like, I always want to know that. And the way he blasted them, I'll be interested to see how those guys respond. You want to jump in and say something, Catch?
Well, to piggyback off of what, look, I really like Chris Beard. So I don't want my comments to sound like I'm in hater mode, right? But if you go back to halftime of that TCU game, the one they blew in the Big 12 tournament, and they were up by 20 points at halftime or whatever it was, Beard was interviewed at halftime. And when they asked him about being up by 20 and how well the team was playing, he tongue in cheek gave himself the credit. He was like, all this hot shooting must be that great. It must be all that great coaching, right? So, you know, so from one half of basketball for your team to be playing so well that you tongue in cheek give yourself some credit, to 20 minutes later kind of separating yourself from them, it's a hell of a 180 to make 30 games into a season. That's your team. And it's the same thing that we would have said about Sarkisian by the end of his first season. Like, stop with the Herman stuff. You're 11 games in, you're 12 games in, we're almost at the end of the season. This needs to be about what you're doing and not what the other guys didn't do. And my only problem with Beard, not that I disagree with him about his team, but you're the head coach making millions of dollars. Like, if that team hasn't crossed an emotional threshold, a mental threshold, that's on you. Like, that's kind of what the coach is supposed to do over the course of a season, is fine tune a team and mentally have it so sharp that you're not having to say those things. That's something that you say in November and December. Oh, this team needs to learn that it's not nearly as good as they think they are, or that there's more that, like, that's your job to instill that during the season. So
it'd be like you saying, man, these riders at OB, I don't even know what they're doing nowadays. Like, Jason, he's been slacking off lately. Onward, I don't know what to do about him. And, some of these other guys like Cole, like, these guys need to step up. And someone say, was it at your website? Like, exactly. Don't you run this?
Like, if Onwar's writing a column that I think stinks, and I wait until the end of the season to point out that his column needs to be better, that sounds like a conversation that needed to take place before I'm publicly lambasting Anwar for his column work. So I just think that, again, I'm a Chris Beard fan. I think he's going to have a lot of success in Austin before it's all said and done. But, we got to keep it a buck. And when things happen in real time, like your son running back and forth,
I don't know what's going on.
Like sometimes you have to acknowledge it.
Yes.
You can't wait 5 episodes later to be like, my damn kids run around. Like, at the end of the day, I think that these are all learning moments. And I'm curious to see how Beard and his basketball team, because the thing about the basketball team is if they flame out in the tournament, it's not a disaster, but it does increase the pressure next season going in on a team where we don't even know what, a little bit like last year. It's impossible to look at Chris Beard's team right now and definitively know who's coming back, what the team's going to be built around, what are the strengths and weaknesses. He's going to have to do what he did this year, next year, all over again. He's going to have to go to the transfer portal. He's going to have to do all of those things. The expectations going into year 2 will be, show us some substance. Like, it might be too much to ask, like it was a year ago for Vic Schaefer to beat Baylor. That was too much to ask a year ago. And nobody was judging Vic Schaefer on the Baylor thing until year 2. Year 2 occurs, and now you've lost 2 times again in a row, and that's 4 times in 2 seasons, and you just started to have fans wonder, all right, well, he was brought here to win that game and to get Texas basketball over a threshold. When is it going to start to happen? To Schaefer's credit, it happened literally a month later. I think that you'll find I think next year Chris Beard will find himself in a position where if he's not outperforming Texas Tech, if they're not achieving a level of success that I think is expected upon his hire, you'll start to hear some rumblings after season 2. And we're still a ways away from that. But, you know, you have to talk about things as they happen. And so far, this Texas basketball season has been much more like, I said it a month ago, and people flipped 2 months ago, and people flipped out. The program's a lot closer to being a replica for Shaka Smart's program than it's not at this point. They play hard. They play good defense. They occasionally win a really big game. They have trouble scoring. They lose in March. And if that happens, we've seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it. And quite frankly, you'd look at Beard's season and you'd go, Shaka had a better year last year. Shaka had a better year in his last year than Beard had in his first year. And it's not apples to apples, but it was impossible not to see them lose to TCU in the first round of the Big 12 tournament and not remember, oh, they won this thing last year. You know,
Yeah.
It obviously didn't matter,
Yeah.
but in a side-by-side comparison, it is what it is.